Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobben, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Well, good evening and welcome back to the Toasted Tavern. It's so good to be back on the air. Scott Tobben alongside myself, Michael Wags, Wagon Connect, to talk to you all about the local sports scene. And honestly, there's a lot to talk about. Stuff that went down just a few hours ago. We've got the Home Run Derby getting ready to start. Definitely going to be talking a lot of baseball today. Just had the NFL Draft, NBA Summer Leagues going on. I mean, things, it's just so hard to wrap your head around the sports scene right now. But before that, man, Scott, how's it going? How was your 4th of July? How have the last couple of months been for you?
Busy, man. I've been really busy, as I know you have as well. But overall, pretty well. Fourth of July weekend was busy. Worked most of the weekend. Had Morgan Wallen concert at Busch Stadium 2 nights, Thursday and Friday night, which was absolutely crazy. We had 45,000 at the stadium on Thursday night and 47,000 there on Friday night for Morgan Wallen. So just absolutely packed. Got to give a lot of credit to country music fans that showed up. For the most part, everything went really smoothly as far as crowd control and all those kinds of things. And he put on a heck of a show, man. You know, he had a couple of openers, and it was just like a party downtown. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, was it more or less than what we saw here with Taylor Swift in Kansas City this past weekend? I mean, look at that packed. I still call it Arrowhead, even though it's GEHA, whatever it is. It's Arrowhead. She absolutely packed that stadium this past weekend. What kind of comparisons can you draw between Morgan Wallen and Taylor Swift?
Well, the fact that they both pretty much sold out, you know, massive stadiums on each side of the state all weekend long. They both played 2 nights in a row. It's pretty comparable. The country fans, the pop fans definitely came out. Like I said, it was just a big party downtown this weekend, man, which was cool to see because, you know, after the shows, you know, all the bars downtown, there were people everywhere. It was just nice to see downtown hopping all weekend long.
Yeah, we need a lot more of that for sure. And obviously we've got, you know, St. Louis City SC playing well. And yeah, the Cardinals may not be playing well, but they're still a good draw. So we've still got that going. And real quick, just because we got it up here, you see all the Swifties out there, and we know what the offensive line for the Chiefs has been able to do the last couple of years, kind of off and on protecting Patrick Mahomes. Who you got in a lineup, Swifties or the Chiefs O-line?
I'm going with the Chiefs O-line. Talking about Patrick Mahomes, though, did you see he was there both nights of the Taylor Swift show, him and his wife?
You know, you got to do what you got to do to make the wife happy, and if you like it yourself, you know, not anything wrong with that, but it was great to see. I also saw Nikki Glaser was down there as well, so a lot of St. Louis representation over on the Kansas City side for Taylor Swift's concert this past weekend. And again, like you said, the fact that we had massive concerts on both sides of the state just, again, shows you what this Midwest is all about. It's not a flyover area. People are here. They celebrate great music, great sports, everything in between. And it's like you said, it's great to see that we were able to pack both venues all weekend. And it was a holiday weekend as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that was a part of it because, you know, I talked to people that had flown in from Idaho and Washington State and all over the place to be at this Morgan Wallen concert. So people came from all over the country to be in St. Louis this weekend. And everybody I talked to was just that was from out of town was just blown away by how beautiful Busch Stadium was and how nice downtown St. Louis looked. So that was good to hear, to get that perspective from people from all over the country.
Yeah, it really is, considering all the rigmarole that St. Louis has been put through with, you know, just national perception and all that. It's always good to see and hear what out-of-towners think and can really say that the city isn't as bad as it maybe seems, although we do still have a very, very long way to go to make things safe and productive down there. But, you know, we're building it up. You got Busch Stadium down there. You got Enterprise Center. You got, you know, City Park. You got Union Station and the Wheel, all that going on. You got the Top Golf going in over there in the Slough area. A lot of really, really good things going on downtown, and even more to come as well. But Let's set that aside. Let's get to the meat of this show, which is talking about sports, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. Got the home run derby getting ready to start here on ESPN, and it's another one of those. It's in Seattle, so not necessarily a hitter's ballpark for one of these kinds of events, but you've got some powerhouse guys going at it for the title today. Just looking at the lineups, you got Luis Roberts going against Adley Rutschman. Dolis Garcia versus Randy Arozarena. Yeah, okay. Couple of former Cardinal products. Okay, let's not talk about that yet. Mookie Betts and Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Pete Alonso and Julio Rodriguez. I mean, you look at that and you go, man, Pete Alonso, two-time champion, as a 7 seed. It just shows you the power that Major League Baseball has right now. And yeah, a lot of it is shifted to the American League side of things, but I think the National League is going to represent pretty well here as well.
Yeah, I think it'll do okay. I'm going with, I don't know about you, but I'm going with the hometown kid tonight. I'm going with the Seattle guy to win this thing. I think Rodriguez wins it. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to think he would be able to win it because he is the hometown kid. Although there's always a lot of pressure on the hometown player to go out there and produce. We've seen it multiple times, including Albert Pujols when he was here in St. Louis with the All-Star game as well. You want to put on a good show for the fans, and sometimes that makes you tighten up a little bit. 3 Cubans in the roster tonight of home run derby participants. I would not be surprised if any one of them won. Randy Arozarena is a guy that always seems to rise to those kinds of occasions, so we'll see if he is able to produce pretty well. Looking at it, there's so many opportunities for guys to really show out tonight. Just because I was such a fan of his father's, I just love the way that he goes out there and just has fun upon fun upon fun. I got to go with Vlad Guerrero Jr. tonight. I think he might wear himself out a little bit, but I really love the way he swings, and I think he's going to go out there and put on a good show tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good pick. He's going to put on a show. All these guys are going to put on a show. I don't really care who wins as long as it's not Pete Alonso. I'm not a fan of that guy at all.
I don't think anybody in St. Louis is a fan of Pete Alonso at all, considering what he did, although Stubby Clapp took care of him pretty well last year. So, yeah, anybody outside of that, I mean, yeah, I like to sit there and say, okay, I'd love to see a Cardinal product show up pretty big tonight. And, yeah, that may get some fans a little riled up because, we already know about the arguments going around. Oh, why did we trade these guys? Oh, they're stars in the making. Okay, yeah. If you could have sat there in 2017 going back and said, hey, yeah, don't trade this guy because he's going to be a star. Where were you then, and how come you're not in Major League Baseball now as a general manager? Because we can armchair quarterback and general manage the ends of the earth, and none of us would get it 100% right. So yeah, it sucks to see some of these guys that could be Cardinal products producing, especially when the Cardinals are struggling the way they are. But it's still a fun event, and to sit there and say, hey, one of the guys that won it was a product of our organization, it just gives you some. Just something that you can take pride in and know that, hey, maybe it can happen with a guy that we have in our system now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Nolan Gorman's a guy that you can definitely see in the future being in that home run contest. If he would have gotten elected, he was going to be willing to participate this year. But he's definitely a guy that I would love to see in the home run derby. And at some point, Jordan Walker also, with the power that he has, would be fun to watch.
Well, obviously, only one Cardinal in the All-Star roster, which is Nolan Arenado, because the Cardinals have not been good this year. 38-52 right now in 11.5 games back of the Reds for first place in the Central Division. It's been a tough season. I know you've spent, obviously, every home game down at the stadium, so you're able to see a little bit more about what's going on the day-to-day with the St. Louis Cardinals. I'll be perfectly honest. I think I've watched a total of 3 games this year, and at the beginning of the year, it wasn't because I wasn't interested in it, but as this year's gone on and you just see the consistent struggles of the starting pitching, of the relievers, of the offense at times, of the defense at times, it's just not become appointment viewing for me anymore. But I'm still keeping an eye on it, and seeing what's going on. And, you see the Adam Wainwright situation, trying to get to 200 wins, now on the IL, maybe should have gone on sooner. The fact that, they passed on a bunch of guys in the offseason, and now you're struggling in the starting pitching in the starting pitching aspect of things. You're seeing the offense kind of do some stuff here and there. Wilson Contreras hasn't been as good offensively as I think people were expecting him to be. You still got Goldschmidt and Arenado doing what they're doing, and Jordan Walker, after the kerfuffle of him going down because he wasn't doing what the team wanted, but was hitting like crazy at Memphis, and now has come back up and is going crazy up here. I mean, it's just a very, very tough situation to be a St. Louis Cardinals fan right now, and yet there's still this little glimmer of hope, whether that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, that this team could potentially still make a run to the playoffs. I mean, you almost wish they'd either turn around completely and die this year, or they have to get off to such a hot second half start that it can be no doubt that this team's going to make the playoffs before the trade deadline hits.
Well, and you don't have enough time now to get off to a hot enough start to be no doubt that you're going to get in the playoffs before the trade deadline hits, because you've got, you're going to have 2 weeks basically, and you're 11 and a half games out, and you're still 14 games under 500. So, I mean, and we've seen this team go in streaks where they can win 7 or 8 out of 10, and then they fall apart again. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do the next couple of weeks. I mean, it's so hard to sit here and say, okay, I think they're going to be a buyer, or I think they're going to be a seller. I don't, honestly, if you ask me right now what I thought they were going to do at the trade deadline, I would tell you that I think they're going to do a little bit of both. I don't think they're going to be a buyer totally. I don't think they're going to be a seller totally. I think they're going to try and sell a little bit, and I think they're going to try to, possibly make an addition or two to try to build, not necessarily for this year that much, more towards next year in 2025. I think you're going to see them go out and try to get some guys that have some term that they can bring in, that can be pieces that can maybe help you make some kind of run this year, but more looking towards 2024 and 2025. And in doing that, I think you're going to see a move on. I hope you're going to see them move on from the guys that have expiring contracts. I hope you're able to move a guy like Paul DeYoung, who I think has done enough that has some trade value. Tyler O'Neill's going to come back on Friday when the second half starts. Hopefully he has a decent 2 weeks that you can possibly get some trade value out of him. And then you've got to look at the pitching. I know we need all kinds of starting pitching next year, but, Jack Flaherty's a free agent. Jordan Montgomery's a free agent. Jordan Hicks is a free agent. Do you look at those guys and say, okay, we definitely need to bring these guys back? Or do you say, you know what? Maybe we can trade these guys and get younger versions of them, or upgraded versions of them that are a little bit younger, that, we can have for 4 or 5 years of control at a much less cost. And then we can still look at adding that ace at some point. And maybe that happens at the trade deadline. I'm not sure that the ace that they're looking for is going to be available at the trade deadline, but maybe you can make an upgrade. Maybe you can go out and get, although he wouldn't be a long-term option either unless you re-sign him, but maybe you go get a Lucas Giolito and say, okay, we're gonna roll the dice, see how you do the second half, and with the idea that we're going to sign you long-term if everything goes well. I know, there's been a lot of talk that they've talked to the Mariners about some of their young pitching out there. Seattle needs some outfielders, so maybe, that seems like a logical fit. But, there's just so many questions about who you move, what you do. Now you're looking at the catcher situation going, okay, did we totally screw this up? Is Wilson Contreras going to be our catcher? Is Ivan Herrera ready to be the catcher? Do we move Wilson Contreras to the outfield? Do we make him the DH? What do we do there? You look at this team, and you can blame Ollie, you can blame the players, but everything that's gone wrong in this season, you can throw right at the doorstep of the front office. I mean, John Mozeliak did an absolutely horrible job of putting this team together. I hate to say that, and being a Cardinal employee, but, he's got to take the blame for this and say, I screwed up, and now I got to try to figure out how I fix it.
Well, and that begs the question, you look at the fact that, at the trade deadline, you're going to go out and potentially add and subtract at the same time. Where is there any confidence in this front office that they're going to be able to target and then make the deals that will make this team better. I mean, you look at what this front office has done over the last handful of years. Yes, they brought in Nolan Arenado on a steal. They brought in Goldschmidt on a steal. But they've also had so many miscues that, is there any confidence that they would make the right deal? Because, you hear names like a Nolan Gorman and a Jordan Walker being floated out there as trade potential. Yes, that's talk, and a lot of times that's just smoke to try and get teams interested to start talking. But it also wouldn't be something that I would put past this front office if they felt like it was going to make them better. I don't see how that would be the case. But what is the trust level in this front office at this trade deadline that they are going to set themselves up for a better future?
To be honest with you, it's really, really low. That's the thing, is you feel good about the fact at this point that Gersh and Mozeliak can smart moves, because they've shown the inability to do it now for the last, 3 or 4 years. It seems like you said, other than the Goldschmidt and Arenado trades, which were slam dunks, what move have they made that's made any sense or that has worked? Nothing. You look at it and you're like, okay, Wilson Contreras right now you'd have to say is a disaster. Jeff Passan did an article today and said Wilson Contreras was the least valuable player in Major League Baseball, which, that's not a ringing endorsement for what you did in the offseason with $86 million. You've got to question. I mean, you have to question the moves they made. Why did you give Miles Michaelis a 2-year contract? What in the world made you think that was a smart move going into this season? Because he's not been very good the last couple of years. I mean, he's been okay, but not a guy that's worth $18 million. Just so many bad decisions. The Steven Matz deal looks bad, although, Matz pitched well yesterday, and maybe he can figure it out. But so far, that deal's been a disaster. We can go down a long list of bullpen mistakes that they made with big signings. It's just, again, it goes back to really the last time they made a free agent signing that was decent was Matt Holliday. And, that was 13 years ago. It's just been one bad decision after another. And you hope that he can figure this out and somebody can pull off a good trade and you can go get some guys that'll help. Yeah, there's really no confidence in there. And, you look around and you hear people going, well, maybe you trade Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan to get some pitching. Well, okay. So if you trade Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan this year to get pitching, what are you doing next year when all of a sudden you have pitching and wait a minute, nobody on this team can hit now? That makes absolutely no sense to me. If you're going to trade some of those guys, you're going to trade, to me, you trade a guy like Dylan Carlson, you trade a guy like Lars Nootbaar, you trade Tommy Edman, who, I know a lot of people in St. Louis think Tommy Edman's the greatest thing that's ever happened to baseball. But, you look at his offensive numbers, and they've gotten worse every year. You look at his numbers this year, and somebody will tell you he's hitting .239. He's got 7 home runs and like 26 RBIs. But if you go back and look at it, about 17 of those RBIs came in about 6 games where he had 4 or 5 RBI games. He's hit a couple of grand slams. He's had 4 or 5 big games that have really been the numbers that he's put up. Other than that, he's been pretty awful this year offensively, honestly.
Well, just looking at his last 4 years, really. So in 2020, he hit 250, jumped up to 262 in 2021. Was at its peak outside of his first year. He hit 265 last year. Now he's dropped down to 237, a 303 on base percentage. And that's the thing. You don't necessarily want Tommy Edman to be your power guy. You need him to be a guy that gets on base. Well, when your on base percentage is hovering right around 300, that's not going to do it for this team that needs guys on base for the Goldschmidts and the Arenados and the Jordan Walkers. He's walked 24 times. He's struck out 50 times this year, which, obviously strikeout to walk ratio is never going to be even or positive as far as, walks are concerned, but just 14 stolen bases this year and only 29 RBIs. So, he's another one of those guys that, I don't know, I would say that the shine has worn off on him because, both you and I were very skeptical early on about what Tommy Edman was going to be able to do in Major League Baseball. And, we have been pleasantly surprised at what he's been able to do for this team for the last couple of years. But you can see now that potentially either it's exposure or it's just the fact that he's being shifted around to different positions on the field that has really kind of shaken him offensively a little bit. That, maybe if he settles in at one spot, maybe his offensive numbers go back up and he's a good guy to get on base and help your team out. But it's possible it doesn't. So do you take the time and his value right now and try to get something for him? I think you have to think about it, because you have, guess what? A guy with a little bit more power in Brendan Donovan, who, again, doesn't have a long track record of being successful long-term. But if you're going to go with Tommy Edman and you can get something for him, you've already got a replacement in Brendan Donovan.
Well, and the thing about Donovan too is he's got more power, but his on-base percentage is so much better. He draws walks, he makes contacts, he hardly ever strikes out. He draws a ton of walks. He's a much better leadoff hitter than Tommy Edman is. He's proven that the last year and a half. I just think Brendan Donovan, I know Tommy's done a really nice job in center field when they've had to stick him out there. But, and he has. But Tommy also struggled really bad at shortstop early in the season when he was playing shortstop every day. So I just think if you're going to move one of those two guys, to me, I'm moving Edman and keeping Donovan, because, like I said, Donovan's a better all-around offensive player, which is what you need. Plus, he's a little bit younger. Edman's going to be 28. Donovan's only 26. So, and he's going to be cost controlled a little bit longer, which I know that's why a lot of people say Donovan's the guy you trade, because teams are going to go, ooh, we have more control over him. Yeah. But, I still think that Donovan's the guy that you need to keep around. Plus, he's just a little bit more, he's feistier. He's kind of that scrappy guy that this team needs, that they don't have a whole lot of. That tough, I'm going to throw my elbow out there and let him hit me if I need to get on base. Whatever I need to do, I'm going to do. And, he's just a little bit different in that aspect than Tommy. So, that's my thought process there. And then, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
And then, the outfield, same thing. In one way, you hate to give up on Dylan Carlson because he was so highly thought of. But, at some point, and make some moves there. And, I think you have to look at Carlson and you have to look at Nootbaar. Okay, are either one of these guys really ever going to be what we were hoping they were going to be, or are they more fourth outfielder type guys? And you've got to make that decision. And, if they've got trade value right now and you're not 100% sure, then you need to make that trade now while they still have some value, and don't get stuck 2 years from now going, oh man, we could have traded them for something and we didn't, and now what are we stuck with? And that goes back to a couple of years ago when I laughed at this and said there was no way I would do it at the time, because he wasn't very good either. But the Cardinals had the opportunity to trade Tyler O'Neill for Zach Wheeler 2 years ago at the trade deadline, and didn't do it. And obviously now we all look at that and go, man, that was a huge mistake.
Yeah, no, you certainly do. And then you got, the Randy Arozarena trade that went down, and he's just now hit number 17 in the first round of the home run derby, and he's kind of matured a little bit. Obviously he had some issues, in public life when he was with the Cardinals, and even when he went out to the West Coast as well. So you feel like maybe he's kind of settled himself down now that he's down in Tampa. But, it's interesting to see what deals were done and what deals weren't done. And again, you're gonna have fans that are gonna look at it and say, oh, 2 years from now when Tommy Edman is a World Series MVP at second base for so-and-so, yeah, you had him, why'd you let him go? Or Nootbaar or Dylan Carlson or what have you. It's like in the scope of what we saw, and I think Ben Fred was actually talking about this on Twitter just a little while ago, with the Arozarena and Garcia and the fact that the Cardinals could have had Luis Roberts. They had such little looks at the major league level that you were still kind of basing everything on hope and what their potential was. And yes, you look at those three and their potential has shown up, and you look back and you go, well, fudge, why did we get rid of them? But 9 times out of 10, you look at potential and they fizzle out. So you're basically taking a 1 in 10 shot of a guy being good. And unfortunately, looking at it right now, those three all hit. So, 3 out of 10, that's a higher percentage than most of these guys usually get. So They just kind of got unlucky. And Carlson maybe has a chance. I mean, he's a guy that probably a fresh start will do him good. And yeah, I could see him being a guy that is a very serviceable outfielder. I don't think Tyler O'Neill will be. I really don't. Not because I don't think he can. I just don't know if physically he can. He has been injured so much in his career that there's just no way for him to be able to sustain it over such a long period of time. Yes, he had the good year here in St. Louis, but that was it. And I just don't see it being something he can replicate anytime after that. And, with Edmonds, same thing. He's not a long-term player in my eyes. So if you've got the ability to get some value for any of those three guys that will help your team either this year or in the coming years, I think you have to do it. And you have to get out of your mind the fact that this team could potentially go on a run. If they do, great. But you have to have the mind for the future in order for this team to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tyler O'Neill, there's going to be a team. If Tyler O'Neill can come out and have a good couple of weeks, there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to, Tyler O'Neill's interesting because, he's a two-time Gold Glover. He was an MVP. He was an MVP candidate a couple of years ago. We know he's got the speed. He's got the power. And he's only 20, just turned 28. So there are going to be teams that are going to say, hey, I'm going to take a shot on this guy. And you might be able to get a bigger return for Tyler O'Neill than you really think you can. And while I agree with you that I don't know that Tyler O'Neill is ever going to be able to stay healthy, you could put Tyler O'Neill in a different ballpark. Say you put Tyler O'Neill in a place like Atlanta or Boston or Baltimore or one of those smaller ballparks that the ball flies like it doesn't at Busch Stadium, and he may go from hitting 25 or 30 home runs to hitting 45 or 50 home runs. Yeah, he might hit 220. And he might only play 100 games, but, a bunch of flyouts that he has at Busch will be home runs in all the ballparks. And that's the reason that I think that Paul DeJong still has a lot of value to a lot of teams, too, because they're going to see the power that he has. And, again, you put him in a different ballpark, he's going to hit a lot of more home runs than he does at Busch because a lot of those flyouts to the track at Busch Stadium that he hits are going to go out of a lot of other ballparks.
Well, and you saw what he was doing down at Memphis, too, when he was down there. I mean, he obviously hitting off of AAA pitching and things of that nature, it allows you to kind of inflate the statistics a little bit as well. And, Paul DeJong still has some value defensively as well. I mean, it's not huge. It's not a difference maker defensively, but if you've got a guy that can at least solidify a spot, that also helps you as well. And for a guy like Tyler O'Neill, he's not going to be hitting 3, 4, or 5 in a lineup. I think, especially for an American League team, if you got a guy that's hitting 220 and hitting bombs for you down in the 8 or 9 spot, that's a huge plus for you because that means your lineup turns over so much because they're not getting any easy outs. So I think for O'Neill, you're going to have to be looking at an American League team per se, but with the DH now in both leagues, you can't even quantify it as an American League thing anymore. So, the fact that Atlanta sits there and they're, one of the best run differentials in the game at a plus 147. They're behind just Texas and Tampa Bay in that instance. You add them to that Atlanta lineup, watch out. Atlanta's probably the favorite because, outside of them, I don't see anybody else that I sit there and I'm scared of. And speaking of that, let's take a quick look at some of the at the standings for the All-Star break because we made our prediction. We were talking about this before the show. Last time we were on, we were doing our Major League Baseball preview show, and we made our picks for, how each division we thought was going to pan out. So let's take a look, starting with the NL East, about, where these teams sit based on where we thought they were going to be at. And, a little different, huh? A little different. Philadelphia, we thought was going to be up at the top. They're sitting in third right now, outside of a playoff spot. The Mets are just a disaster. They went from being in second place to fourth place in the matter of a month, and they're like 14 games out of first place right now. I don't even know. Actually, they're 18 and a half games out of first place. My correction. 18 and a half games out of first place are the Mets with the highest payroll in Major League Baseball. And that's what you get from there. And, for me looking at it, and we were talking about this as well, and I should have pulled the audio, but, I said, hey, the Marlins are a team that could surprise a lot of people. and possibly sneak into a playoff position. And right now they are in a playoff position because Skip Schumacher has installed the Cardinal way down there in Miami, and they're doing things the right way. He brought in the right guys to help lead that offense and defense and the pitching staff, and they're doing things that I think nobody expected them to do this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, Skip, the Marlins are playing Cardinal baseball. They pitch and they play defense. They hit for contact, they run. They play Cardinal baseball. And you look at that Marlin coaching staff, and you've got Skip managing, you got John Jay at first base, and John Mabry is your assistant hitting coach. So, there's a lot of Cardinal ties to what's going on in Florida, and you have to be happy for Skip. You wish that he would have stayed in St. Louis and maybe eventually become the manager here, but you have to be happy with the way things are going down there for them. And then, you've got other Cardinal ties there too, of course, as Sandy Alcantara, of course, as everybody should be in St. Louis pitching in our starting rotation, but that's another mistake that John Mozeliak made. But yeah, that Marlin team has surprised people. I thought they were still a year or so away, but I think the biggest move that the Marlins made was going out and getting Luis Arraez, having that contact guy hitting almost 400 that doesn't try to hit the ball hard, doesn't try to hit for power, but he's on base all the time and he steals bases. And he proves right there that you don't have to worry about launch angle or velocity off the bat. It's just making contact and being a good fundamental baseball player. And the Marlins have a bunch of those right now, and Skip's going a long way with it.
That he certainly is. So that's a look at the NL East. We talked a little bit about the Central with the Cardinals and where they're at. And the surprise up at the top are the Cincinnati Reds. We thought, hey, they were going to be in last place. They're leading the division right now by a game over the Milwaukee Brewers. Cubs sitting there in third. Pirates were up near the top for a good portion of the first half and have since dropped back. But the thing about the Central, and it's a crazy thing to look at, and that's why I think that this division is still up for grabs for anybody, is you look at the run differential for these teams in the Central. Cincinnati leading the way in the Central at a -9 run differential. Second place team, the Brewers, are a -13. The Cubs, a +26, and I think you can credit that mostly because they play at Wrigley, and you usually score a bunch of runs at Wrigley. The Pirates, a -46, and the Cardinals, a -33. 4 of the 5 teams sit there with a negative run differential. If any one of those teams can find pitching and keep hitting offensively, they have a chance to really make some hay in this division, and especially considering you're going to have a lot of divisional games coming up in the second half.
Yeah, you would think so, and it's going to be interesting again to see what happens at the trade deadline, because a team like Milwaukee, remember last year they were in first place and they traded their closer at the trade deadline and fell apart. So what's to say they don't trade Corbin Burns, who's going to be a free agent? I know they're sitting there in second place, but there's a real possibility that they may trade Corbin Burns at the trade deadline. You look at the Cubs, and the Cubs have said they have no interest in re-signing Marcus Stroman. And so Stroman's one of the best pitchers in the National League. Does he move? The Pirates are going to get their stud shortstop back in the next couple of weeks after missing most of the first half. He was so good at the beginning of the year when they were hot. So do they kind of rebound? The division is going to be really interesting. Do the Reds go out? The Reds starting pitching, do they go out? Are they buyers? Do they try to get a top starter to do things, at the second half? And what do the Cardinals do? And the Central Division of the National League is going to be the most interesting in baseball because it is up for grabs. It's, who's buyers, who's sellers, what happens in the next couple of weeks is going to be really interesting to watch.
That certainly will. Out in the NL West, no surprise, the Dodgers sitting up there at the top of the division. We thought they were going to be up there regardless of first or second, and they've done everything they needed to do. I think the big surprise there, and again, I talked about Arizona in the pregame, in the previous show as well, being another one of those teams that could potentially be a surprise team. Wouldn't shock me if they were last, wouldn't shock me if they made the playoffs, and yet they're sitting there in second place right now, mathematically tied with the Dodgers for first place. LA 51-38, Arizona 52-39. So just percentage points separate them. And you got the Giants right there where we thought they were going to be at third. But the Padres, the big drop down to fourth place, and another team with a high payroll. They have the third highest payroll in baseball, and they're sitting 4 games under 500 right now.
Yeah, so as much as we like to complain about the Cardinals and we're upset, and man, the Cardinals didn't do anything, would you be more upset if you're being a Cardinal fan and saying, man, we didn't do anything, or being a Mets fan or a Padres fan, and those two teams went out and got everybody and spent all this money, and it's just absolutely not worked? I mean, San Diego was supposed to be the next team of the team of the decade, basically, with all the superstars they brought in, and it just has not worked. I mean, they're pointing fingers, they're blaming each other. There's been some talk that they may trade Juan Soto at the trade deadline again, because it just hasn't worked. They've got such a huge salary and so much money tied up to. Think about this. If the Padres are bad now and they're not winning, look at the contracts that they have guys signed to. So basically, Hugh Darvish will be in his 40s when that contract is up. Manny Machado will be in his 40s when that contract is up. Fernando Tatis Jr. will be in his 40s when that contract is up. Xander Bogaerts will be in his 40s when the contract is up. So, I mean, you've got all this money tied up to these guys that long term, and you're not winning, and you're not going to get better as they get older, as they move out of their prime. And Machado is already starting to move out of his prime now. And Bogaerts isn't very far from that. I mean, it's just a huge disaster in San Diego as well because, you've got these guys locked up, and who's going to take those contracts?
Nobody. I mean, you're going to have to eat some of that money, and I think, you look at Major League Baseball, I believe that is something that teams can do now is eat some of the contract money. And, yeah, you look at it and you have to weigh the fact, okay, do you spend a ton of money or do you try to develop from within? Well, you're seeing that both ways are actually kind of failing right now, and it's really comes down to the fact that you've got to be able to scout properly as well as evaluate talent properly when you're going out there to give out big contracts. And you look at, I hate to say it, but you look at what the Dodgers do. They seem to evaluate talent very, very well. Yes, they go out there and they throw money around left and right, but looking at payroll, the Dodgers had the 5th highest payroll this year at $222 million. So it's not like they're throwing out crazy amount of money, but they develop talent and they evaluate talent that they're trying to trade and sign very, very well. And that's why they have been up near the top of the NL West and the National League for the last 10 years or so. And it's a lesson that teams should be looking at because you're seeing, like you said, what the Padres and the Mets have done, gone out and spent ridiculous amounts of money. I mean, the Mets are at $353 million. I mean, it's just insane how much money they put out there, and to sit there in 4th place is ridiculous. But they also aren't developing talent either. The Dodgers have done both. I mean, you look at what they've done with, Kershaw, Gavin Lux, these guys that they've brought up through their organization. And yes, eventually they will sign long-term expensive contracts, but at that point they have a track record. And then they evaluate the talent from outside that they go and spend good money on, and it all seems to work. It's front office, it's management, it's everything that seems to work, and neither the Padres, the Mets, nor the Cardinals seem to have that in the National League.
And you know what's funny? If you go back and look at the Dodgers and you look at their history, go back to 2010, 2011, the Dodgers, and they're on record, their general manager and their manager is saying the Cardinals are the model organization. That's the organization we want to be, that signs players, that develops players, and then sprinkles in a free agent here or there. But they basically followed the model that the Cardinals used in the early and mid-2000s, and that was so successful here. And it's basically what the Dodgers have done for the last 10 years, is they followed that Cardinal mold. The Cardinals have just gotten away from it. Unfortunately, under John Mozeliak, you've made bad decisions. Again, like you said, you talk about the Cardinals. Cardinals have developed talent because it's all over the major leagues. Like you said, you've got 2 guys that the Cardinals developed in the home run derby. The guy that won the Cy Young in the National League last year, the Cardinals developed. The guy that's probably going to win the Cy Young in the National League this year, Zach Gallen, the Cardinals developed. So it's not like the Cardinals can't develop talent. They can't evaluate talent. They just don't know how to not trade that talent away. They've just made bad decisions. You think about it now and you go, man, the thing that kind of broke this team is the Marcell Ozuna trade, because you traded Alcantara and Gallen for Marcell Ozuna, and that was another one of those situations where Mozeliak got desperate because They wanted Giancarlo Stanton, and they had a deal worked out for Stanton that apparently neither one of those guys were in, and Stanton turned it down. And so you had to have a power bat. You know, fans were begging for power. You know, and so Mozeliak got desperate, couldn't get Stanton. They tried to get Yelich. The Marlins weren't willing to trade Yelich at that point. So then you went to Ozuna, who, in Mozeliak's defense, Ozuna had won a Gold Glove and had been in the MVP conversation the year before. But there were questions about how he was off the field, you know, his work ethic, things like that. That was well known in Miami, but the Cardinals took that risk because they were desperate, and they traded 2 young guys, and, you know, we know what happened. And, you know, you can look up and down the last 7 years. The Cardinals get desperate. You know, you go into free agency, you know, go back to 2017. We need a center fielder. Our main objective this offseason is to get a center fielder. We have to get a center fielder. Well, they wanted Charlie Black. They couldn't get him. They wanted Adam Eaton. They couldn't get him. Tried to trade for both those guys. Couldn't do it. So what did they do? They overpaid for Dexter Fowler. They gave him more years than he needed and more money than they wanted because they let everybody know we have to have a center fielder this offseason. How did that work out? It didn't. Okay? So then you go to 2018. We've got to have a power hitter. We've got to get a middle of the lineup bat. Everybody knows. We couldn't get Stanton. Couldn't get this guy. Couldn't get that guy. Settle for Ozuna. How did that work? It blew up. What happened last year? Mozeliak came out. We have to get a catcher. We have to get a catcher. Our main objective is a catcher. Well, then he wasn't willing to go get the catcher that really fit the Cardinals organization. The guy that made the most sense was Sean Murphy. But oh no, I've made too many mistakes trading young players, so I'm afraid to do that again, so we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to send another guy from the Cubs that the Cubs couldn't trade at the trade deadline last year because everybody in baseball knows that he sucks defensively. Nobody wanted him the last 2 years at the trade deadline because everybody knew he was a horrible defensive catcher and a horrible base runner and maybe not very good in the clubhouse. But we have to have a power bat at catcher. We have to go get a catcher. So, again, we gave him more years than you needed to. You gave him a 5-year contract at $88 million, and you got him here, and guess what? He's not very good. And now you're stuck again. And after a month, you're like, this guy can't catch. Now what do we do?
And the crazy thing is, you know, they're like, we have to get a power hitting catcher. Yadier Molina was not a power hitting catcher. He hit home runs at the times you needed him to hit home runs, but he was not a prototypical power hitting catcher. He was a contact hitting catcher. He knew how to make contact when you need. He was the perfect hit and run guy. You saw it time in and again. He made great decisions when it came to putting ball on the bat and putting it in the right spots. You didn't need the power catcher. And yes, you know, Murphy would have been perfect, but now you're sitting here and you're going, okay, he basically got burned trading guys, and he got burned signing guys. And I'm saying this as I'm looking at Adley Rutschman right now. He just switched sides in the home run derby, and he is hitting from the other side of the plate in his bonus time. He is mashing home runs. He is almost at 30. I think he's going to hit somewhere in the 28, 29 in the first round. His dad is his pitcher tonight. And like, what a moment. I think unofficially he hit 27 in the first round. And wow, he's going to be a guy that if you're not a Baltimore Orioles fan, you need to search out this guy because he is going to be something else for the next couple of years. But back to Contreras and in that aspect, you know, Mozeliak's been burned in trades. He's been burned in signings. At what point does any of that change? Because he's now in a position where he's not the first guy fired. Because the first guy fired is the guy that you never hear from. The puppet of this Cardinals organization, which is Michael Gersh. He's going to be the guy that's on the line, and he's probably sitting in his office going, I haven't done anything, and my name is going to be the one that's put out there that's going to be fired. Like, at what point does a change higher up get made, and how much loyalty does the ownership have towards John Mozeliak?
That's a good question, and I don't understand it, honestly. And to go back to your other point, yeah, Michael Gershon, I'm sure, is just biting his fingernails and going, oh my God, I'm just going to sit in my office and lock the door and hope nobody knows I'm in here. Yeah, at some point you can't blame the manager anymore. You can't blame the coaches. Although, I mean, it would be nice if we had a pitching coach that knew what he was doing. But, at some point you have to look at the general manager or the whatever Moselak's title is now.
Player of baseball, president of baseball operations.
Head of baseball operations.
He's the Pobo.
Yeah. Fancy title for him. Yeah. I mean, he's been there now since 2009, I guess he took that job, 2008, something like that, when Walt Jocketty got let go. So, it's time for a new voice in that organization. And, a lot of people think that Mo must have some incriminating evidence against the DeWitts or something, that he's like holding against him to keep him from losing his job. But at some point, he's got to be the guy that you point a finger at, and it's starting to happen. Early in the season, the national media was all like, "Oh, it's not John Moselak. John Moselak's been amazing and he's great," and blah blah blah. Now you're starting to hear the national media say, "Okay, you've got to look and put a finger right at John Moselak." Even Greg Amsinger, who's been the biggest John Moselak defender of anybody, this past week said this all falls at the feet of John Moselak, and it does. And you have to wonder, because you don't even hear from him. It's not like he comes out and talks to the media when they're struggling. I mean, I will give him credit, in the last week or so, he finally has popped his head out and done a couple of interviews. But for the most part, he's been silent all season. It's just like, doodly-doo, I'm in my office and everything's fine. And, when you do hear from me, I talk down to you like I'm smarter than you are and, don't bother me. And, I think that's part of the reason that he's under so much heat is Cardinal fans feel like he thinks he's better than us and he's smarter than everybody that's a Cardinal fan. And, he does talk down to people and kind of is condescending. And I think that's part of the problem there. It's also part of the reason that a lot of people don't like Ali Marmol, because he does the exact same thing. But anyway, yeah, at some point the blame has to fall at Moselak's feet, and he either has to make some major changes, or you have to move on. And he can't be afraid to pull a trade because the last couple have blown up in your face. Because when you start doing that, then you're just going to make more mistakes because you're making safe moves instead of the big moves you need to make, and that doesn't work. The last couple of off seasons, he's been able to patchwork. Oh, I'm going to sign, 65-year-old pitchers that come in and stabilize things. And I'll say, oh, we patchworked it and we're going to get to the postseason. Well, you can't go out and sign, the crusty veteran this year that's 50 to come in and try to fix things for 2 weeks, because it's not going to work this time.
No, it's not. It's certainly not. And just taking a quick look at, like Walt Jocketty was hired in '94, and he ended up passing the torch at the 2006 season and that World Series championship. In that time frame, they won 7 National League Central Divisions, 2 NLCSs, 1 World Series championship, 7 straight winning seasons, including 100-plus win seasons in 04 and 05. So he was there roughly 12 years. Okay, and was successful. Moselak took over in 2007 as the team's general manager. So they have made the playoffs in 6 years. They won 1 World Series and 2 NLCS National League pennants. So they've done that, but they have not had that sustained success. And yes, they've had consecutive winning seasons, don't get me wrong, but it's not been the 100-plus win seasons that they saw under Walt Jocketty. And really, early on they did, but again, how many of those players potentially were still Walt Jocketty products and not necessarily John Moselak products during those handful of years where they were really good? I mean, a lot of it was, the MV3 and a couple of guys that came in after it. And, they ended up letting Albert Pujols go, but they ended up, they did sign guys, Carlos Beltran and Lance Berkman, all that to kind of, take over and help propel this team into the next generation. But, would things have been different if they would have sucked it up and given Albert the money that he was requesting? Would you have been able to keep Yadier Molina? And there's so many other questions that go into it. So it's not like he's made poor decision after poor decision. It just seems like the good decisions that were made early on bolstered this feeling of, yeah, everything I do is going to be golden because I'm part of the Cardinals organization. And now things continually go wrong. And instead of looking in the mirror and going, okay, I got to make some real changes, it's no. Everything's going to be good. Every decision I'm making is going to be good for this organization. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. And changes don't get made in the way that changes need to be made. And it's going to be interesting to see because, we said 12 years for Jockey. So we're sitting on, year 16 now of John Mozeliak?
Yeah, and he signed a 2-year contract, so he extension before the season. So you've got a long time left. Real quick, talking about Moen, that's what he hangs his hat on is, I've only had one losing season as a general manager. Well, think about this real quick. Just compare the two guys real quickly because we always talk about the moves that Mo doesn't make. Think about this in the years that Mozeliak, or the years that Jockey was the general manager. So 96, he takes over in 95. 96, he goes out and says, okay, this team's not good enough. What am I going to do? I'm going to go get Ron Gant. I'm going to get Gary Gaetti. And I'm going to go get Dennis Eck. And we're going to go to the postseason. Okay? So you go to the postseason in 96. 97, not very good. You get to the trade deadline. What am I going to do? This team's not very good. I know what I'll do. I'll go get Mark McGwire. Okay, so you go get Mark McGwire. Okay, team wasn't very good, but you had McGwire for 98 and 99. You go into 2000, you go, this team wasn't very good. What am I going to do? Let's see. We'll get Darryl Kyle and Mike Matheny and Fernando Vina and Jim Edmonds. That should help. And Pat Hinkin and Andy Bennis. Let's see what happens. 2001, hey, this team's not very good. We need to do something. Let's go get Woody Williams. 2002, hey, this team, we're at the trade deadline. Let's go get Chuck Finley. 2003, they made a couple of moves, didn't really work, but they tried. 2004, hey, this team's not very good. Well, it's good, but it needs to be better if we're going to win the World Series. Let's go get Larry Walker. 2005, they said, hey, let's go get some guys. They did. 2006, hey, our starting rotation's not very good. We need some strength. Let's go get, I don't know, who can we go get in 2000? Who can we go get that will make this team better? Let's go get Mark Mulder. Let's see if that helps. Did that help a little bit? Yep, that helped. Okay, we have issues. Let's go get Weaver. Maybe that'll help. Oh, yeah, we won a World Series. 2009, Jockey did it that year. 2009, he said, hey, this team's not very good. Or I said Jockey, Mozeliak. The one year that he really went for it, 2009, hey, this team needs help. We're going to get Mark DeRosa. We're going to get Matt Holliday. We're going to go get John Smoltz. I mean, he really went for it in 2009. It didn't work out, partially because Matt Holliday dropped a fly ball in Los Angeles in Game 2 of the playoffs that everybody wants to forget about. I'm sure Matt does too, but cost him that game. But he went for it. Other than that, and in 2011, he did too. He said, okay, we're going to trade Colby Rasmus and go get all these pitchers, and then we're going to sign Rafael Furcal, and we're going to make a run. After that, what has he done? He got Lance Berkman, too, in 2011 to start the season. So those were the moves he made. 2012, you lost Albert. You went and got Carlos Beltran. Since then, where are those big moves other than the two trades that we talk about with Goldie and Arenado? He hasn't been willing. It's I'm going to go get a bullpen piece. Oh, I'm going to go get, so-and-so. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, talking about Jockey again, 2006. He also went and got Ronnie Belliard at the trade deadline, which was an talked about move that really helped solidify the Cardinals World Series team in 2006. But, again, Mozeliak, other than 2009 and 2011, since then, at the trade deadline, it's been, we're going to go get a bullpen guy that nobody has ever heard of, or we're going to go get, John Lester and who else? Well, who's the other guy they got that year it was Lester, and who was the other starter?
I cannot for the life of me remember.
He was good, too.
Yeah, he was good. That was the problem. Son of a gun. Who was it? I don't even remember. That's
veteran
terrible.
Guy, but yeah, I can't think of his name. Lester and that's going to bug me out. It'll come to me in a minute, probably.
It will.
It was veteran. It was veteran guys that everybody was like, really? That's what you're going to do? And it worked, but, it didn't you didn't go very far because it was just a patch. It wasn't really to fix anything. And the same thing last year. You went and got Quintana and Montgomery, which everybody what happened was like you went and got who? You went and did what? And it helped a little bit, but it wasn't enough.
J.A. Happ.
There it is.
Yep.
And everybody laughed and mocked him when he made those moves, but they did work to help get him in the postseason. But they're not the impact moves that Cardinals have made in the past at the trade deadline, or that they need to be making now. Another guy that I forgot about that Jockey went and got when they needed him 2000 when Mark McGwire got hurt. They went and got Will Clark, who was just unbelievable in 2000 down the stretch to help that team.
It certainly was. And then, you look at the flip side of it too, and you go, okay, under Mozeliak, the farm system has dramatically improved, yet, they don't give those guys opportunities consistently at the top level, which eventually leads to them trading these guys that had high ceilings, and then they produce at the higher level of Major League Baseball with other teams. And then, again, you're out there signing off the scrap heap when you really could be using some of the guys in your farm system to bolster those spots and maybe set yourself up for the future. So lots of stuff to talk about when it comes to that. Let's jump over to the American League side as we continue to go through the All-Star break standings. Starting the AL East, we both had the Blue Jays up at the top with the Yankees. And that's not how things are playing out right now. I mean, we had Tampa down in the 4th spot, but I think, back in our preview, we were talking that really any one of these 4 teams could lead this division, and Tampa Bay is doing that right now. Baltimore is exceeding expectations, although we both had them sitting around 3rd in this division. So, you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, they're not where we predicted them to be, but I think we both were of the mindset that all 4 of these teams were going to be jostling for placement in this division. It's just there's a little separation now between Tampa and Baltimore and Toronto and New York. It's Tampa and Baltimore 2 games apart, but then Toronto and New York are both 7 and 8 games back. The big surprise has been Boston at 9 games back. All 5 teams are above 500 in the AL East.
Yeah, Tampa, obviously, the start that they got off to was unbelievable. Baltimore's a little bit farther ahead this year than I think everybody thought they were going to be. I think everybody kind of thought it was going to be another year or so before they really took off. The Yankees have run into the same problem that they've had the last few years. The guys that they went out and gave big money to can't stay healthy. Judge has been hurt now for a month or so, and nobody knows when he's going to come back with the ligament issue in his toe. Giancarlo Stanton can't stay healthy, which is, nothing new. That happens every year. They went out and got Rendon to pitch, and he has come in and has not been able to be there most of the year. The guys that they traded for at the deadline haven't been there. I mean, Harrison Bader's hitting cleanup for the Yankees right now, which, I mean, and he's been good in New York, but same thing, he can't stay healthy either. But, they just can't stay healthy, and Toronto's just kind of an enigma to me. We talked about they needed to go get pitching, and they added pitching a couple of years ago, and they added pitching, and they've still got that same lineup, and they just, for whatever reason, can't seem to get over that hump. So that's the team that I'm really kind of surprised with, because I really thought this was the year that the Blue Jays were going to kind of run away with that division. And the Red Sox have been better than I think anybody thought they were going to be. They've had a lot of injuries, but guys like Chris Sale have kind of rebounded a little bit. They've had some guys kind of bounce back and be part of that rotation that have been injured and have surprised people. But yeah, overall, the East is a really tough division.
Yeah, definitely a tough division. They're out in the American League Central again. The Guardians, 2nd year in a row, they have just shown people up in a sense. We thought it was a fluke last year. They're continuing to be impressive this year. It really takes the Shane Bieber on the trade block conversation pretty much off the table, because he's one of those guys that is helping lead that rotation and doing a very, very good job of it. They do have just a half-game lead over the Twins, so it's not like it's cut and dried. But the fact that the Tigers are sitting there in 3rd place with the White Sox down 8 games back. A team like the Cardinals that continuously blows leads. The White Sox and the Cardinals are mirror images of each other, and they face each other to end the first half, essentially, and the Cardinals were able to take 2 of 3, including a come-from-behind victory on Sunday. But, you look at it, the Royals are just an absolute mess. We thought maybe they would, get a little bit of a boost with some of these young players. It has not been there. The Central has just been kind of like the Blue Jays in a sense, a bit of an enigma because the teams you think were going to do well aren't, and the teams that you were like, are actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, and the division mirrors the National League Central pretty well. I mean, nobody's really been very impressive. There for a while, everybody was under 500. They were just kind of struggling to stay above water. So, it's going to come down probably to Minnesota and Cleveland. But that division is going to be interesting to watch just to see who is a seller. Does Cleveland, even though they're in first place, do they really think they can go very far in the postseason, or do they go ahead and move Shane Bieber if they think they can get a haul for him, to try to stockpile things? And the White Sox are going to be interesting because I think that team's pretty much going to tear it down at the trade deadline. Pretty much anybody you can think of, his name is on the trade market. So we'll see what the White Sox do. And then, like you said, the Royals have just been a huge disappointment. Everybody thought they were going to step. Bobby Witt's the player that everybody thought he was going to be. He's definitely having his breakout year this year.
Yeah, it's just a shame that no one else is coming along for the ride right now. But it does give some brightness to the future of the Kansas City Royals, knowing that Bobby Witt is on his way. And over in the AL West, again, the biggest surprise I think for me this year is the Texas Rangers. We knew last year that they struggled. We weren't sure how their pitching staff was going to be, but they've been pretty darn good. 148 plus 148 run differential this year, but it's not because they're just absolutely blowing teams out of the water. I mean, they've allowed 383 runs, which is right there in the middle of the American League West, and actually one of the middle of the pack kind of teams in the American League as well. So their pitching staff has done a good job of keeping things in control as well, and the offense has started to wake up. They're sitting 2 games ahead of the Houston Astros, who I was able to see them about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago here at Busch Stadium, and they're a team that you recognize a couple of names, but you don't recognize a bunch of them, and that they still go out there and produce, and they win as a team. And I think those trash can banging days are well behind them, and you're seeing that guys like Altuve and Bregman are more than the cheating scandal that went around, and they're also very good leaders of men. And then you see Seattle sitting just a game over 500 right now. A little bit of a surprise that they're that far down, but still, again, an opportunity to make a run in the division. And I think we thought the Angels were going to be way out of it. I mean, I thought they were going to end up in third place. Don't get me wrong. I didn't think it was going to be a close third place, but Shohei Ohtani has been the real deal this year. He's an MVP and a Cy Young candidate this year. And that's just something you just don't hear of. And yeah, maybe he breaks down in a year or two because he's trying to do too much and trying to do everything. But if some team goes out there and gets him for a good price, which is not going to happen, this guy's going to command a $500 million, $600 million, $800 million contract. But he actually might be worth the money for the next couple of years for a team. And if he can help a team win a couple of World Series championships, it might be worth it. I'm not saying the Cardinals should be one of those teams that does it, but I think he's starting to prove some people wrong, but he needs to be able to do it more consistently. He's got them sitting at 7 games out of first place right now. So, yeah, the Angels still may break down because the pitching staff behind Ohtani isn't great, but who knows? Maybe they have a chance to sneak in.
Yeah, I don't think so. I just don't see it. And I'm one of those people. I wouldn't touch Shohei Ohtani. I wouldn't pay him $300 million. Honestly, I really wouldn't. And I know people look at me and say you're crazy when you say that. But the guy just turned 28. He's going to be 29 next year. Trying to be a pitcher and a hitter both, and all the wear and tear he had on his arm in Japan. At some point that arm is going to give out, and then you've paid all this money and you don't have him as a pitcher or a DH, and it's just not something I would do. Plus, if you give him $600 million like they're talking, how do you build a team around him? He's going to go somewhere, and it's going to be the Angels all over again because you can't afford to put a team around him.
Well, and the fact that they couldn't do that around Trout, who's now injured. They couldn't do it around when they had Albert Pujols, Anthony Rendon, who's been injured. They they're a team that, like the Mets, like the Padres, spend money left and right, but have no method or rhyme to their reasoning behind who they sign and why. And that's why they sit where they sit, which is usually in the lower half of the American League West. And then you got the A's that are bound for Vegas, that just they have no rhyme or they have no reason to go out there and play well, except for the fans that they have as support. And you just feel for the fans of Oakland, because again, losing another team, they're starting to feel a little bit like St. Louis when it comes to the NFL. You know, they do everything they can.
Oh, it's worse at Oakland.
And yeah, it's definitely worse. But you know, we know the feeling, Oakland fans. We know the feeling. You have a compatriot here in St. Louis.
Yeah, you know, we think it's bad that we lost the Rams. You know, Oakland lost the Warriors, they lost the Raiders, and they're going to lose the A's. So imagine what we felt threefold.
Well, and two of them went to Vegas. You know, Raiders went to Vegas, and now the A's are going to Vegas. So yeah, it's not a good time to be an Oakland A's fan. So hopefully something good happens in the Bay Area for them, for sure. All right, we've talked long enough about baseball. Let's hit a couple of the other big stories that have been dropping here today. You have to look at the craziness that's been going on in college sports, and it got a little bit crazier a couple hours ago. You have the DUI arrest and quote-unquote resignation of Bob Huggins over at West Virginia, who now is saying he didn't resign and is going to sue if they don't give him his job back. And then Pat Fitzgerald was suspended for hazing allegations that were going on in the football program over the last handful of years up at Northwestern. Well, Northwestern decided to take a second look at the suspension, and they ended up firing him today. So I was going to ask you, going into today, which one of these was the weirder situation? But I think we already know the answer, that the hazing allegations, which should have been something that was taken care of a long time ago, especially after the Penn State debacle, that has to be the situation that's the most serious. But looking at it, which one of these is just the one that you just shake your head at?
You know, I mean, Bob Huggins, you kind of expect something to go wrong because it happens everywhere he coaches. You know, he's had controversy everywhere he's been. The hazing thing is definitely the more interesting story, and the fact that, like you said, he was suspended, then they went back and said, you know what? We're not going to suspend you. We're going to fire you. It makes you wonder how much more there is to this story that we haven't heard yet, and what's going to come out, exactly what was going on. And, you know, it'll be really interesting to see, and I guarantee you, anybody that thinks that Northwestern is the only place that stuff like that's going on is crazy, because it's happening at every university, at every football program, at every athletic program, at every school in the country.
And the crazy thing is, though, is after what happened at Penn State, I know it wasn't necessarily hazing that was going on, but the fact that what's come out has been that Fitzgerald and the coaching staff likely didn't know what was happening, but the fact that they had the ability to find out and didn't is the thing I think that really rubs people the wrong way, is that you can't be surveilling these kids 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Stuff is going to happen. Hazing is going to happen. But when the stuff that is being said to have been done is being done in the locker room of the school that you're coaching at, and you don't have any clue what's going on, that right there sits there and it makes me think, what is going on? Like, did we not learn anything from what has gone on in the past? You know, we're doomed to repeat our failures in a sense by having this stuff continually go on. As I said, you can't stop it 100%, but when it's going on in your own house and you turn a blind eye to it, I don't want to say credit Northwestern for actually firing him, because they should have done the research and then made a final decision, and not the suspension and, oh, wait, we're going to change our mind. But at least they did listen to more of the information that was brought into them and then ultimately make the right decision. And I saw on Twitter before going on today, though, what are the betting odds that by the time SEC Media Days hit that Pat Fitzgerald is the defensive coordinator down in Alabama?
Very possible. It's very, very possible. That's the thing is, he got fired there and there's all this stuff, but it's not going to keep him from getting a job because he's a good coach. So somebody's going to take a chance as a coordinator and give him a couple of years to rebuild his reputation. And then before you know it, he'll pop up as a candidate for a head coach somewhere else. And it comes down to a lot of these college coaches aren't hands-on with their players. They're kind of CEOs and they depend on their coaching, their other coaches, and their coaching assistants and those things to handle the players and handle all of that stuff. And they're just kind of not necessarily a figurehead, but they're kind of just, at the top, the executive that kind of oversees everything and is not really paying attention to the finer details of stuff. And you see that with a lot of coaches, especially in college, especially in bigger programs. So, I think it comes down to, they're counting on some of these other guys beneath them and assistants and associate coaches and those kinds of things to really monitor this stuff. And then, are they doing their job or not? And when they're not, the blowback ends up coming to the head coach. And a lot of times they aren't aware of what's going on.
It's just an unfortunate situation for all involved, players and everybody that's part of the organization, because there are things that can be prevented and aren't. And for somebody that's is covering sports, and if you look at it and you go, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to be watching out for? What do I need to be saying in these instances as well? And if you're looking at it and you're going, did I do enough to help the situation? Those are the things that we now have to sit there and think about and worry about as media members and things of that nature. And it's a dangerous slope to walk on for sure, and it's not going to get easier anytime soon. Let's stick a little bit with the college theme, but kind of add in the NBA, because the NBA draft was a couple of weeks ago. Victor Wembanyama went number 1 overall to the Spurs, and since that moment, there's been some drama in the NBA in the Summer League. And it's not just the fact that he's been shut down after 2 games of Summer League play. It's the fact that Britney Spears is now involved in this situation.
What's weirder, that Britney Spears was involved or that Victor Wembanyama didn't know who Britney Spears was?
Well, he came from France, so I'm not surprised that he didn't know, and especially his age too. He was born well after the popularity of Britney Spears, but who would have thought that the first woman that would have been a part of his life was Britney Spears?
Although Britney's still, there's not too many people around the world who still don't know who Britney Spears is, though, because she's in tabloids, she's on the news for something all the time.
Well, maybe he is the genuinely the one athlete that does not pay attention to the tabloids or celebrity status and really was focusing on his craft to make sure he got into the biggest league in the world.
Are you sure he was focused on his craft? Because after his first Summer League game, he said he wasn't sure what he was doing on the court, which isn't what he went the number 1 pick to say after their first game.
Well, not only that, I mean, that's what he said and that's what he produced. And then he came out and he had a really, really good second game. And the Spurs were like, we've seen enough. We are going to shut him down and go from there. That I just don't get that thought process. Now, don't get me wrong. What the Spurs have been able to do with their talent development and all of that stuff has been second to none. They've been a very, very model program to watch. But even sitting there going 2 games in, 1 good, 1 bad, and you're going to shut them down and get them ready for the regular season, I think really what they're saying is we're getting him into the weight room right now, and he is putting on some muscle before the season starts.
Yeah, there's muscle, there's they're a little bit worried about how to deal with his body because we haven't seen a 7'4" guy that can do the things he can do. So nobody's really sure exactly how they want to, they're trying to figure out exactly how they want to train that body and work that body to make sure that he's in ultimate shape. And then how much of shutting him down is like, okay, we don't need you to say anything else stupid to the media. So we're going to have you practice by yourself in that gym and nobody's going to know about it so that you can't have media blunders like this.
That might be it as well. I mean, again, young guy coming in from overseas, you have to kind of learn the landscape that you're in as well. You don't have the same sort of, media coverage over in France that you do here in the United States. So that's also a good piece of that as well. Locally, Kobe Brown, first round pick, last pick of the first round to the Clippers, first Tiger to go in the first round since Michael Porter Jr. back in 2018. And it's going to be really good to see him because it looks like he's excited for the opportunity. I think the Clippers really do believe that he's going to be a piece of this organization here this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to get a chance to play quite a bit. Well, we know that the Clippers can't stay healthy. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are both going to be hurt half of the season. So he's going to have a chance to play, kind of like Boy Hodge with the Lakers. That 3 or 4 of those guys are going to break down and he may get a shot.
Yeah, and Mizzou doing themselves proud. They're starting to build that organization. Well, that program back up, and it's going to be fun to see how things play out this year and in the coming years as well. And because of that, there's starting to be some more rumblings, especially after Adam Silver spoke about the NBA expanding as soon as next year, about St. Louis being a potential landing spot for the NBA. And, obviously you've got the fact that the Hawks' only title came in St. Louis. You've got Jason Tatum and Bradley Beal as big marquee names in the NBA. We're the third largest city without an NBA team, but the likelihood that the NBA is coming here very soon, I still think is very low because you got Seattle that lost the Supersonics that are continuing to push for a franchise. And we've already talked about the city, but Vegas is another one that is high on the list of places for a professional sports team to go. And the fact that they're going to have football and baseball in the coming years, adding basketball in there is not out of the question. They also have the NHL there. So really basketball is the last place or the last team that really needs to get in there of the 4 major sports. So to me, it doesn't look like St. Louis is likely in the near future because I think that like the soccer team, they're going to need some local representation, some local ownership. And that's going to probably fall on the guys like a Jason Tatum, a Bradley Beal, a Larry Hughes, in a sense, to put something together that makes sense for the league and for the city. So I don't know if I'm off base here, but I think it's something that could potentially happen, but it's still a ways away.
I mean, we should have an NBA team here. I mean, there have been 3 instances in the last 20 years where it was almost a done deal. And then the St. Louis partnership that was supposed to be part owners has blown it up. We could have had the Spurs here in the mid-'80s. That deal was almost done. We almost had the Pelicans, and we almost had the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies probably were the closest. The Grizzlies and the Spurs were probably the 2 closest. The Lauries totally screwed up the Grizzly thing because he wouldn't give it a year. They wanted him to wait 1 more year, and they had the deal done, and it was signed, sealed, delivered, and the Grizzlies were in St. Louis, and he got his panties in a wad and wouldn't wait a year and backed out of the deal because he wanted it done immediately. But, I think it's very definitely a possibility. The NBA would definitely like to get a foothold in St. Louis. They've seen all the talent that's gone into the NBA from St. Louis and from Missouri in general. When you look at some of the kids that have come from, all over the place in Missouri that have been big-time players in the NBA and in college basketball, they would love to get a foothold here in St. Louis. And so, I think in the next 4 or 5 years, you may actually see it finally happen.
That'd be very interesting to see. And, you saw what, the MVC continually does here on a year in and year out basis. The fact that the NCAA has held different portions of the national tournament here as well, including the national championship. You see all of that and what St. Louis can bring in. It's not out of the question that an NBA franchise could do well here. And you saw the success of what St. Louis City has been doing in their first year with local ownership. That's probably the angle that they're going to have to take in order to make that happen. But again, a grassroots kind of thing can work here because that's what St. Louis is all about. It's blue collar workers. It's family blue collar workers that make this city run, and that's exactly what you would need for an NBA franchise to thrive here. So one more stop on our trip around the local landscape, and it's St. Louis Blues off season. You're looking at that picture right there and you're going, okay, Blues made some moves. They've made, who the hell are these guys? These are the off-season moves the Blues have made this year, which is basically re-signing Tyler Tucker, bringing back Mackenzie McEachern, extending out Hugh McGinn to a two-way contract and bringing in a host of minor league players in a sense, including the brother of PK Subban, Malcolm Subban. That's about all the Blues have been able to do this offseason because, you know what? They don't have a whole lot of money. As we've seen, with the signing of Tyler Tucker, the Blues now have 9 defensemen under contract on one-way deals going into this season, which means Doug Armstrong's going to have to work some major magic here in the next couple of weeks. And yes, I know I didn't throw Kevin Hayes on there. He was the big acquisition that the Blues made. But again, it was more of a salary dump more than anything else, a salary flip in a sense. You haven't really done much to move the needle when it comes to the cap space that this Blues team has. And you've still got to re-sign Alexei Toropchenko, who I think is going to be a big part of this Blues offense going forward. But you got to move some of these defensemen as well. Torrey Krug nixed the deal to Philadelphia that would have brought in Travis Sanheim as well. So who's the guy that's going to be on the trade block that could potentially be moved by this Blues team? Who knows, because they all have no movement clause in a sense. Colton Parayko, Justin Falk, Torrey Krug all have no movement clauses. I don't want to see Justin Falk go anywhere. I think even though he's a bit undersized, I think he's a very valuable asset to this team. Torrey Krug was the guy that I thought was very likely moved out, but he's got a brand new child, and I don't blame him for sitting there and going, no, I like security. I like being here. I'm going to stay here. Colton Parayko, I mean, yeah, that would basically be saying we lost on this one, but maybe he's the guy that can fetch the biggest return. I don't think he wants to leave St. Louis, but maybe Doug Armstrong can do something to sway his mind and get that contract off the books because they need to do something.
I think if one of them goes, it's still going to be Torrey Krug. And I know he turned down the trade. He, used his no trade clause and said, no, I'm not going to Philadelphia. But if you're a player and you know that the team doesn't really want you here anymore, do you really want to stay? Is that something that's going to work when you get to training camp? Because you're going to have that feeling that, hey, they didn't want me here. Why do I really care? I still think there's a chance that they find a fit for Torrey Krug. I know he'd like to go back to Boston. There was some talk that maybe he would go to Philly and then Philly would flip him back to Boston. But, I think he's the one who can go. I think it's either going to be him or Marco Scandella. I think one of those two guys are the ones that go. But I would, if I had to guess, I would say Torrey Krug is the one that still at some point they figure out a way to move on.
Well, they have to find something because going in with 9 defensemen on one-way contracts is not how you want to go into a new season. And it also means that they haven't been able to sign any of these free agents that are out there. Not to say that any of them are really going to be like big movers of the needle here for the Blues, but obviously Toropchenko is in arbitration, so he's going to be signed. But how much of that money and the pie is he going to be taking up? But still out there are guys like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. Those guys are still out there on the market. Vladimir Tarasenko was signed by Carolina, fired, then he fired his agent, hired somebody else. He's still out there, possibly could still go to Carolina. He's still available. Defensively, you're not going to touch Matt Dumba because you've already got 9 guys under contract. Thomas Tatar's out there. The Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, that's more of the, hey, if Boston wants to bring him back on one more hurrah, that's what's going to happen. Those guys may just retire. But the one guy that's still sitting out there that makes the most sense and has done everything he possibly can to tell St. Louis brass that he wants to come back is Oscar Sundqvist. He has been at almost every single St. Louis City game I can think of. He went on the road this past weekend to Toronto to watch him play. This guy is born to be a St. Louis Blue. Craig Brewery loves him. He's a guy that will fit into this lineup very, very well. The only problem is are they going to be able to afford him? And if not, what's that going to look like when the team lets another guy like that go to another potential Central Division team? As we know, Ryan O'Reilly went to Nashville. It just, none of this seems to be going well for the Blues right now.
No, and from everything I've heard from guys, the stuff that I've heard from Blues insiders that are, Jeremy Rutherford and, guys that are around the team, they all don't think the Blues are going to make any more moves. They think this is the team that is going into training camp and, there's just nothing else that's going to happen. So, I mean, it would be nice to bring Sundqvist back, but I don't really think that's going to be something that the Blues are looking at. I think if they were going to do it, it would have been done already. I think they're going to go into this season and, I think they brought in a bunch of guys that are placeholders that they're like, okay, this team's not going to be great again next year, we'll make a run, see if maybe we can slide into the playoffs. But I think really they're looking at 25 and beyond is really being competitive again.
Oh, they're going to have to still do something with the defense because a lot of them are signed long-term, and Rodriguez is just going bonkers here in the first round of the home run derby. He's in his bonus times, already hit 37 home runs. I think the pressure might be off of him a little bit, but is he doing too much in the first round? We'll have to see as this one progresses along the way. For the Blues, the schedule was released as well. We had a lot of really, really good games on the schedule. We'll break that down as we get closer to the regular season. But another year where maybe a little bit lean for the Blues. You may see the Cardinals miss the playoffs. You may see the Blues miss the playoffs. And I posited this question to my brother at the start of the season when St. Louis City SC was sitting at 5-0, best start for an expansion team in Major League Soccer history. And I was like, okay, would you trade the Cardinals and the Blues missing the playoffs this next season for a St. Louis City MLS championship in year one? And he goes, I probably would, but I'm not 100% sure because if the Cardinals and Blues miss the playoffs, that doesn't necessarily mean that in the following year they're going to be any better. So I'll put it this way, and I'll ask you this. Now that we're at kind of the halfway point of the baseball season and the MLS season, would you trade the Cardinals and Blues missing the playoffs this year and this year alone for St. Louis City SC to win an MLS Cup in their first year?
Since the Blues have already missed the playoffs and the Cardinals are more than likely going to, I'm going to say yeah.
Oh, I meant next year for the Blues. Next year for the Blues. Semantics.
No, I'm thinking this year. We're using this year. That's hard for me to, I don't want the Cardinals to miss the postseason any year, but if you can win a championship in your inaugural season, that would be a pretty special thing. So you've got to say, yeah, I think I would.
Yeah, but you got to have the Cardinals and Blues do something in the next year to really make it worth the while. So we'll see how that plays out. We hit on a lot of stuff tonight. Definitely talked a lot of Major League Baseball as that's the season that's really in full swing, but lots of stuff to continue to watch and monitor as the rest of the summer goes on. I know you're going to be down at the ballpark a lot this year as a Cardinal employee. You're going to see a lot more of the baseball season than I am, but getting ready for the start of college football as well. NFL training camps will be starting up soon as well. So as soon as those get going, we'll start talking a little bit more about the fantasy football league that we'll have this year, as well as the Pick'em Challenge that we're going to have this year, as well as part of Gateway City Sports as well. So lots of things on the horizon, as well as weekly shows starting up again. Yes, it's been 2 months since we had a show, but you know what? We've gotten through the hardest part of the summer, and now we're ready to get back and kicking and talking a lot about the local sports scene. So, Scott, anything else you got before we head out tonight?
So, one more NBA thing. Where's Dame Lillard going to go? And has anybody lost their credibility and respect more in a couple of months than Dame Lillard in the last couple of weeks? I don't know if you've heard the latest rumors, but apparently his agent is calling teams and saying, "You better not make it. Better not make an offer to Dame because if he goes to your team, he's not going to play. The only place he's going to play is Miami." If you're really, if that's true, I've lost all respect for a guy that I had a ton of respect for sticking out in Portland all these years.
Yeah, and the thing that got me was the fact that it was so late that he requested a trade. I mean, you look at it and you go, why not at the end of the season just be like, hey, look, I've really done my best to put my whole heart into this Portland thing. It just has not worked out. I want to move on, and I'd like to go somewhere where I believe that I can win a championship. If he would have done that, nobody would have sat there and questioned his credibility or anything. But the fact that he waited until Summer League was getting ready to start, the NBA draft was happening, and now is demanding that he basically goes to one team. Like, I get it. He wants to go to a team that he thinks he can win a championship with. And yes, he has been very, very selfless in his career of being the guy that's kind of taken the brunt of it all. But he let his frustrations out, and it is not a good look at all. And, if nobody makes an offer and Miami's the only one that he wants to go to, what does Miami do? They say, okay, we'll give you like 2 of our practice players. That's about all we're going to offer. And if you don't take it, oh, well, I guess you're stuck with a bad contract and nobody that plays.
Well, that's pretty much what Miami's done. They're like, hey, we'll give you Tyler Hero and a couple of draft picks, which if we win the finals, you're going to get like the 32nd pick for a couple of years. And Tyler Hero. And Portland's like, no, that's not going to work for us. But if Dame's telling everybody else, hey, don't try because I'm not coming there, he's got 2 years left on his contract. I mean, Portland can play hardball and say, hey, we're not going to trade you to Miami for that deal, and you can either play for us or you can retire and, give up that money and go home. It's not like he's got a lot of options, honestly.
No, not a whole lot of leverage whatsoever. So, again, that's another situation to kind of watch as the summer progresses, as the summer league continues and then wraps up and you get into training camp for the NBA as well. So, plenty of storylines left and right in every single sport. Oh, yeah, we got the Women's World Cup getting ready to start down in New Zealand and Australia as well. U.S. looking to win another World Cup championship. So just so much stuff going on. The U.S. men's national team is coming back later this year as well. So, I mean, the sports world is buzzing right now, and we're going to be along for the ride from here on out. So make sure you come back and watch plenty of shows with us. Scott, what else you got?
You know what I can't wait for, Wags? It's going to start in 2 weeks. Training camp starts, and then ESPN and NFL Network, we're 24 hours, 7-day-a-week coverage. Aaron Rodgers and everything, Jets, Jets. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see what Aaron Rodgers is going to do this year. I love that guy so much. Can you tell there was some sarcasm in that?
Just a little bit.
I'm already sick to my stomach even thinking about it.
I mean, I'm interested to see what things that Brett Favre did that Aaron Rodgers is going to do as well. I mean, there were some things that went on in the Jets and Vikings days that, I mean, if Rodgers does that, oh my. Let's just put it that way.
Aaron might have a little bit too much of his little cocktail mixture, and he might know where he's at. And he may show up and practice naked or something. He likes to be touched by hundreds of hands of his ancestors, and there could be all kinds of fun stuff going on with Aaron Rodgers in New York.
He goes into his dark room every day and then doesn't realize he's not dressed, and then comes out naked. So yeah, plenty. Oh my gosh!
With his man bun and his gray, he looks like a 65-year-old man. He looks so bad, it's not funny.
Oh gosh! And you know what? He's going to come out and he's going to win the MVP this year. He's going to lead the Jets to the playoffs and a Super Bowl championship, and everybody's just going to be like, dude.
And to be totally honest with you, it wouldn't shock me because that Jets team is going to be good. If he's decent, that team is going to be good. I mean, that might be the toughest division in football with Miami and with Buffalo. And, if New England gets, because there's rumors that the Patriots offered DeAndre Hopkins a contract yesterday, and there's talk that they've talked about to a couple of running backs. And, it'll be interesting to see. There's still some big free agents out there that have to make some decisions here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, there really are. So, again, another storyline to watch as the summer continues. So, yeah, make sure you come back next Monday for another edition of the Toasted Tavern. We'll break down the start of the second half of Major League Baseball, how training camps and summer leagues are going, and really kind of get a little bit of a preview of the NFL season as well. So, lots to talk about then. So, make sure you come back and join us next week. For Scott Tobben, I am Michael Wags, Wagon Connect, saying thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys in about a week.
Hey, it's you-man here from Casey. For all your sports news, catch the Toasted Tavern with Scott Tobben and the man called Wags, weeknights at 9 p.m. You can follow Toasted Tavern on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's get toasted.